couple of disclaimers. This presentation is not comprehensive. There are a lot of other tools out there. You probably use other tools. Related to that, for every command and shortcut, for every menu and ribbon, for every screenshot provided in this session, there are numerous other ways to accomplish what you need to get done. I'm focused on Word because that's what I use, and frankly, that's what a lot of editors use, but I'm not a Word expert. So this isn't based on anything from Microsoft and what they think a random user might use. I'm an editor. I'm trying to share some of the tools I use to be more productive as an editor, which is not to say these steps won't be helpful to writers, because I'm also a writer, but I was mostly writing this while I was wearing my editor hat. I don't need to say this as much, but this is not going to be a workshop. In the live sessions, I feel like I need to say, this is not a workshop. We're not going to go step by step through all of this stuff. We're not going to, you shouldn't be trying to do this as you go along. I do have a handout that we can provide later. I'm not sure what the Hangouts, what the best way to do that is yet, but I do have a handout. Not hangout. Sorry. But those will be, I'll make those available to everybody. And lastly, I work on O365 on a PC. Your mileage may vary if you're on a Mac or if you're on a older version of Word. So now that I've told you who I'm not, in my disclaimers, I thought I would quickly say who I am for those of you who don't know me. I do have some old friends here, people that I've worked with in the past in STC. But my name is Kelly Schrank. I'm an associate fellow of STC. I've been a technical writer and editor for over 20 years. In the last 10 years, I've been a medical editor in the pharmaceutical industry, working as an employee and now for myself. As an independent freelance editor, my niche is editing for formulary dossiers. I also help clients with consistency, structure, and clarity, and Word and PowerPoint. I'm also staying pretty active on the tech writing side of things, as I'm working on contract writing SOPs for an IT department. So I've kind of got my feet in two sides there. I'm also a member of the American Medical Writers Association, AMWA, and the Board of Editors in the Life Sciences, otherwise known as BELS. So let's get started with some add-ins to Word. For those who edit long documents with lots of abbreviations, like technical writing in IT or medical writing, this software to me is worth the money. It's $70 per year. I get it for $50 with an AMWA or BELS discount. But it can generate a list of abbreviations used, tell when they've not been expanded on first use, and point out if they've been expanded more than once. Out of the box, it can help a lot with inconsistencies, create separate styles for separate clients, and it can do a lot of the work for you. If you'd like, yeah. The other thing here that I have is Grammarly. This edition is controversial in some circles. I use the free version, but I've heard that the paid version is not worth the money, and even worse, that it makes your life more complicated by flagging too much. It's an add-in to Chrome, so it can spell check and grammar check your emails and anything you type in any software or apps. Personally, I'm a terrible typist, so I need all the help I can get to type quickly without it being a mess. So moving on to some out-of-the-box, so to speak, Word functionality. We all have favorite keyboard shortcuts. I did a search on my computer, and I had almost 250, many of which I don't even know how to use. So even though you may know some or all of these, there's a good chance there's one that you don't know, or it might give you an idea for one that you should use. For instructions on how to find all of these shortcuts, there's a resource list at the end of the PowerPoint, which I can provide to everyone afterwards, and in the handout that shows how to look for them. So I'll start with a few that I wish I'd known about before. The word count dialog box. I wish I'd known about this when I was putting together my proposals for speaking engagements last year, because they always have all these limitations for characters or words. I know I'll use it from now on for putting together social media posts. So if you do any of those kind of things, that can be helpful. Left-align text, that shortcut is helpful if you're reading along as an editor and everything looks really nice until suddenly it doesn't. You're like, why is the spacing not quite right in between words? Somehow some paragraphs have full justification. Why? I have no idea how that happens, but no matter, easy fix with this keyboard shortcut. The subscript and the superscript are really essential in my medical editing. If writers copy and paste text from another document, they'll often miss that subscripts or superscripts have become normal-sized numbers. So this is an easy way to fix that for them. For those using endnotes and cross-references, using Word's functionality, rather than a separate endnote program, having a keyboard shortcut for inserting an endnote is helpful. Moving on to ways to make you more productive by putting the tools you use in places that are easier to find. Let's talk first about the QAT, or Quick Access Toolbar. So I don't know if you've noticed, but some frequently used commands are not conveniently located in Word, or may require too many clicks to access in Word's default location. Enter the UAT, which I'll talk about now, and the Editing Tools tab, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The default QAT in Word from left to right is the autosave, since I have O365, then save, undo, redo. The last one's the touch mouse mode, since I have a touchscreen laptop. But you can put up over 20 commands there in your QAT. Now, this differs by version, by mode, by size of screen, so don't quote me. There's some differences there depending on what you have going on, but they can really save you time. So let's look at what I've added to mine. So moving the text styles to the QAT is helpful when I'm formatting dossiers. As you can see, there's only 4 to 7 styles normally shown in the gallery over here on the right in a normal setup, which means I spend a lot of time opening the whole style gallery just to apply a style. Having this style gallery open up over in my QAT is only one click faster, but it's more direct and therefore less annoying. You'll see me say something similar to that in most of this section. So moving the paragraph indent and spacing to the QAT is another example that it's not that much quicker than going through the menus, unless you're in the wrong menu at the time. So if you're in the Layout tab, as shown in the bottom screenshot, there's no benefit. But if you're in any other tab, it does save you a click, and it's less annoying. Now, I don't know about you, but I use the paragraph keep with next a lot. When there are no keep with next applied to the paragraphs, the layout, some of your pages will suffer. And then, of course, if there's too many keep with next applied, it's the same problem. The pages look funny, and there's all this white space that doesn't belong there. And for these changes, really easy. In all of these cases, though, I may only save a click or two, but there's reduced frustration and annoyance. And that's what I'm offering you. So I'm not saying you need to add these particular buttons to your QAT. These are what I found helpful. But I'm just asking you to think about what actions that you take often in Word that could be more efficient. So just ask your present self to do your future self a favor and take the time once to figure out how to make them more convenient for you in the future. So moving on to the Editing Tools tab that I mentioned earlier, anything that you added to your QAT can also be added to a brand new Editing Tools tab. And you can call this whatever you want. You can call it your Editor's Tools, your Editor Tools, your Editor tab, your Writer tab, whatever. You can name it whatever you want. But the steps to how to do this are listed in the handout, but you can get a good idea of how it works by looking at the screen. Basically, you're going into Word options, customize ribbon, and add or remove like you do a lot of things. some helpful hints if you get in here. Maybe you've tried to do this before and got a little lost some of the reasons that you might have not found what you wanted. The default in the choose commands from at the top there is popular commands, which isn't really that helpful because if it were a popular command, it would probably be in a popular place. It would probably be in an easy to find place. So if you're trying to find a command that's deeper into the menus, it's probably not there. You may need to look in the all commands if you have an idea of what it's called, or if you know where it's located, which tab it's on, which tab you get to it by. You can look up based on, is in the file tab or the main tab, that kind of thing. And then another tip for this is if you're looking through the commands listed, there's some commands that have similar names, and it may not be obvious what a command does. So one trick for that is to add, for example, here you see word art. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 different ones that say word art on them. What I do is I add them all to the new tab, and then I save the tab, and I go out, and I use the screen tip, which is when you hover over something and the screen tip tells you what it does. I either use the screen tip or I just click on it and see what it does. And then you can take it back out. Now you know where to find it, how to customize it, because you'll have all the instructions in the handout. It's really easy to remove the ones that don't work and just use the ones that do. So here's what I have in my editing tools tab at home, my one at work. This is slightly different. But most of these, the time saving comes up in having the tools tab open instead of having to go through a bunch of other tabs. So this bullets is just because I like bullets. I use them a lot. And the define, so that's just convenient to have that there. The define new number format that's next to it actually takes you one step further. The bullets button that I have right here is the same one that's on your main screen. It just puts a bullet in. This define new number format is after you've pressed the number and you want to choose what kind of numbering you want to use. So this is one step into the menu, which is helpful and saves me time. Here I have a find, just takes you to the navigation pane, because sometimes depending on your screen, it might get a little small. The format here, painter, is here for convenience, but also because the icon is bigger here, and I use the format painter a lot. It's just really small on my screen normally. Styles serves the same purpose as in the QAT. It's just quicker because it's here on my tab. Save, again, just for convenience. Smart lookup is something that I just discovered, and it's not sophisticated, but it basically saves you a couple steps when you need a sanity check for something. So you just highlight whatever it is, maybe it's a word, you're not sure if it's spelled right, and you just click it, and it opens up within Word a menu that it's just a Bing interface, the Bing browser, and it just looks it up in Bing for you. Now, I don't normally use Bing, but just the fact that I don't have to get out of Word and go into my normal browser and potentially get lost in the internet there, it's just helpful for quick things and to lessen my distractions, which as many of us probably have. Oh, squirrel kind of distractions in their life. So moving on to some word automations, here's how I want to discuss how you can use the autocorrect list to make Word do some of the work for you. So here you can see that you can customize your autocorrect list, again in options, but this time in proofing, and then autocorrect. You can see there's already many misspelled words in there, but you can add your own commonly misspelled or mistyped words to the list. So you just pull it up and fill in the replace and the with boxes shown above, and anything that you normally misspell or mistype, it will automatically correct it for you. And it was interesting to me to see, if you just want a little laugh and see how many things were in there. I thought that was an interesting exercise. So next I wanted to mention using autocorrect for saving some keystrokes on inserting symbols into your Word document. So I'm not talking about the symbols that are on your keyboard. Those are easy to find. You just click them, no big deal. But if there's any that you have to go to insert and then symbol to find, sometimes that can take you a few more clicks, especially if you haven't used it recently. It can be problematic. So on the left are shortcuts that are default in Word. These are some I've used on a fairly regular basis and sometimes accidentally, they autocorrect for you. But the ones on the right are some I added based on the ones that are already there. So the first and the second have an underscore, which is on your keyboard, and then the two different kinds of brackets to get you greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. Because going up into the insert symbol and searching through there sometimes is not a lot of fun. And then the last one is for me, if you've ever seen any of my other sessions that I like to talk about, checklists. We'll talk a little bit about them today, but I put the check mark symbol as a shortcut. If I did it again, I'd probably just make it CK instead of spelling out check. But you can keep adjusting things, making things better. So there's that. Next, I was going to move on to some spell check dictionaries, similar kind of things to work on, how you can use them to be more productive. Your custom dictionary is where you add new words while you're running spell check, and it asks you to add to dictionary. You can also manually add words. So the instructions for this are in the handout, but the screenshots give you an idea of how it works. This definitely saves time when you're running spell check with a lot of unique words. You can see at the bottom of the screenshot that I have some crazy farmer words that have been added to mine. But it's fairly simple to add to your custom dictionary and save yourself some time. Now, a little bit harder it doesn't fix it for you, but it just flags it, and then you can decide if you want it or not. So this is good for words that might not be wrong according to a traditional dictionary. For instance, many people type manger instead of manager. Manger is a real word. It's just not probably what you want in professional communications. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But you can put manger in your exclusion dictionary, and it'll be flagged as misspelled during spell check. And then you can decide whether you met manger, probably not, or not. I do have these instructions in the handout, but I just want to point out that the screenshot shows some of what's involved. Some of the things that you need to know are your username, and don't choose the wrong exclusion dictionary. So the one that I've marked here is the English language dictionary, which is probably where most of us are working. And this works for all your Office products, which is nice. So, right now I'm in PowerPoint, if you're in Excel, it'll always flag them for you. So I find that helpful. So as an editor, I'm really focused on consistency. And the newest navigation pane makes this so much easier. When this functionality came to Word, I think it was in Word 2010, it made a huge difference in my productivity and ability to see larger documents better than I can in scrolling around looking for words or phrases. So you can see here I was looking for an abbreviation and trying to find out, when was it first spelled out, expanded on first use, and then how many more times was it used. And you see that they're highlighted. It's just easier to go through things. But sometimes there's some interesting things that go on with terminology with writers. So I find that really helpful. And it seems like Like somebody in one of my sessions didn't know how to get to this. Basically, you just go to find and it opens automatically in Word 2010 and beyond. So another thing that I really like about the navigation pane is the document map function, which allows you to use the power of the navigation pane to reorganize sections of your document quickly and without a lot of cutting and pasting. It does require that you use the heading styles in your document, but I hope, as a lot of tech writers, you're doing that already. I sometimes find I get documents I have to put the headings in to do it, but it makes your life so much easier. But when you're looking at the, normally in the navigation pane, you're probably in the results section. But if you go to the headings section like I have here, you can move the headings around. And the text that falls within each section will move with the headings. Word will also renumber your headings if you have numbered headings. So you can see in this one, you could just move things all around within the navigation pane, and it would move everything around within your document, which is really helpful as a writer. I don't get to do this as much as an editor, but as a writer, it's great. You can also do this in outline view, but my navigation pane is almost always open. So it's quicker than changing to outline view. And here's another cool thing you can do with this. Is, if you right-click near this, you can add a heading before, you can add a heading after. You can delete headings if you just want to, delete it very quickly and not have to go through, the whole section deleting everything. This is nice. The new heading before and after is good if you know that you're going to be doing more stuff. And to me, I find looking at the table of contents when I'm writing a document is really helpful to know, okay, what do I still have to talk about? What haven't I talked about? What makes sense here? How do I move things around? And to me, the navigation pane helps with that. And here, sometimes I'll say new heading before, and I'll just, put some words there of what I think that topic is going to be about, just so I don't forget about it. So I think that's pretty helpful. So when you click, so moving on to find and replace, some of the advanced stuff. When you click the More button in the Find and Replace box, it opens up a bunch of functionality, some of which we'll discuss today. So explore this if you haven't. If you have only been using the navigation pane, there's a lot more to find than that. So the match case I find helpful. When you need to find that one instance of a word that was uppercase early in the document before you figured out later in the document that the rest of the instances were not uppercase. So again, we have like this consistency thing. And I see this a lot in IT where people are just randomly capitalizing things. And you're not really sure, is that a product name? Is that a, and if you just want to get through the first pass without diving too deep into checking every little thing of whether it should be capitalized or not. This is very helpful for going back and fixing things later. Otherwise, you're stuck with a find that will give you every instance, whether it's capitalized wrong or right, or so I find this really helpful. So here's another couple of ways that I use the advanced. There's down at the bottom, there's format, and then I like this to use the highlight sometimes. I'm not sure if I'm the only person who does that, but when I have a question about something that I think might be worked out later in a 100-page document, I just highlight it. And then I can use the find with the highlight to scan through the document, see the highlighted parts. It's a lot quicker than scrolling, especially if I have a lot of highlighted items. Similarly, there's some punctuation issues with the AMA manual of style. They need an M dash or an N dash, non-breaking spaces, like some of these weird kind of punctuation elements you can find with the Find Advanced Special down at the bottom, and you can see that on the right. So these are just some kind of random things that I've had to use in the past that might be helpful for you. So getting a little deeper, but not, the Find and Replace using wildcards. If you're a librarian or something, you probably know all of these, but I find that people are either all about wildcards or they're really scared of them. So there's nothing to be scared about, but I feel like they take a little trial and error before you feel comfortable adding them to your toolbox. On the slide are the most common ones, as evidenced by the next slide, where they're part of the word's defaults. So I don't know if any of these are helpful to you, but it's nice to know what's out there in case you get into a situation. So this is interesting when you're in Find and you go to More. If you click the Use Wildcards button, like I've shown here, it shows you in this red box I have here a whole different set of options than we had when we did not have the Use Wildcards selected. These are all the ones I just showed you on the last screen, but I just kind of want to show like how things change depending on what you're selecting. So just to give you an example of how you might use this, I'm reading a document, it's 100 pages long. I randomly find this genomically matched with a hyphen. And I'm pretty sure that there's been a lot of similar words, genomically minded, genomically defined, possibly other combinations. And it's supposed to be without a hyphen, for one thing, but it's also inconsistent, and I don't know how inconsistent. Is this just one inconsistency, this second one, or have I been missing it? So, did I have a block on for this? Like this, it's like the great editor's, problem in life. Oh my gosh, did I miss something? This is awful. And so for this, I could have searched, genomically, and then, with a hyphen in the navigation pane, and it would help. But what if my eyes missed also other sorts of hyphens after adverbs that end in ly? I found it a little easier to use the wildcards to search. The question mark means any character, ly, and then the hyphen, and you could just go through that a lot quicker. It turns out, nice story here, that it was a one-off. That was the only one that was like that. I have no idea why they suddenly added a hyphen in that one. But I went and searched another document just to test my my wildcard there, and they were everywhere. And it was a document that I had downloaded. I was supposed to edit it later, and I hadn't. This is a very simple wildcard. But I'm just trying to get you started. I mean, somebody could do a whole session on wildcards in Word if they wanted to. I think somebody has done that in previous summits. But just, my thought here is I'm going over a lot of things, and I'm just hoping, out of 100 things I talk about, 5 of them are like change your life. Maybe not change your life, but like make your life easier. So it's simple, but it will get you started in thinking about the possibilities. So in addition to the wildcards we discussed, there are wildcard ranges, which are shown on the screen. The first one is helpful for finding numbers, and that's the one that I use the most. In this example, I used the bracket with a 0 to 9 bracket, and then a comma, and then 3 more instances to try to find, as you see on the right, I've got in red, there is a 4-digit number and it's got a comma. And then there are other ones, not on the screen, but that have the 4-digit number without the comma. And so depending on what the style is, they need to all be consistent. So if I knew which numbers, if they were always using the same numbers, I wouldn't need to use the wildcard, but I don't. I mean, the dosage could be different every time. So this is an easy way to fix that, and a way to use that wildcard. So find and replace with macros is another big topic that you could, and people have done whole sessions on. But I just want to get just a very topical, just to get you thinking and to show you maybe some stuff that you didn't know before. So in case you didn't know it, there are many macros in Word already. The screenshot shows the macros. used in Word commands. You see that on the screen. It says macros and Word commands. And that drop down, you can also do macros in current keyboard settings. And there's a whole list. You can see them in the middle. There's a bunch above. There's a bunch below. When I did it, I came up with 2,000 macros in the all Word commands, and then over 200 macros in the current keyboard settings. So there's a lot to choose from. So you could try one if it seems to be. You can try to run one to see if it seems to be something that you need. What I would recommend tracking changes to see if anything actually happened, or if what you thought would happen happened. But you can also run this list commands, and it will give you a whole list, like in Word, that you could go through instead of having to scroll through here. So it's another way to look for it. But just as a disclaimer, software like Perfected that I talked about earlier is just a sophisticated set of macros with a nice interface. There's a lot of macros out there. If there's something that you really need, you can pay somebody to do just about anything for you. If you don't want to learn this, or you don't want to work that hard, then you could buy one. And I have included a list in the, I've included a link to Catherine O'More Klopp's blog, where she discusses her favorite macros, and that's in the reference list. So hopefully that might be helpful to you. So the how-to steps for creating a macro are in the handout, which doesn't look that hard, but the hardest thing is probably figuring out what to make the macro do for you, given its limitations and your limitations, which you're probably not experienced in creating macros if you've never done it before. But here's the Developer tab, where you can look for macros, and this is where you'll record your macros. Now, if you're looking into Word and you don't see the Developer tab, it's because you need to go back to the Word options again and make it visible, which you'll know how to do if you try to do any of the things that we discussed earlier in the session. But you can see the Record Macro button. That's how you will figure out what to do. You will do what you want Word to do for you and record it. It can be very easy, or it can be very you can make it really hard. So here's an example of one that I do, that I've done, and I have it. I use the magnifying glass as my icon, and you can choose whatever you want. And like I said, I do have instructions, but just to give you an idea of the old way of what I used to do. Every time I edit a document that follows the AMA manual style, I do a series of find and replaces that change the numbers 1 through 10, in most cases from words to numerals. Because many of us were taught in school to use the words and not the numbers for numbers 1 to 10, people just instinctively type it. So I end up finding every one, evaluating when it needs to be replaced with a number. I go through the number 1, and then I go through the number 2, and I go through the number 4. 2, 3, 4, sorry. So I created a macro for myself so that it does all the find and replace for me. Then I just need to go through once, all at once, instead of doing 10 different finds. Yes, Perfected and similar programs can do this, but you might have other uses from this idea. That's what I'm trying to do here, spark you to think of more ways to be efficient by creating macros that benefit you and what you have to do as an editor. And one thing I also wanted to mention was that you definitely want to do this and track changes. And then you can go through them more quickly if you go to the Review tab and you do the Show Markup to specific person and choose yourself. And then you go next, next, reject, accept, whatever it is. It's still a little time consuming. And like I said, you can get a program or you can get somebody else's macro to do it faster probably. But if you're stuck, that's one option for you and one idea. So, if you're concerned, this is the last topic. So this doesn't actually contain tips for how to use Word. But these are something I create in Word, and there's something I use while I'm editing a Word. So there's a connection to me. They're definitely in my toolbox. Definitely an important tool in my toolbox. I'm a big proponent of creating editing checklists for common editing tasks you perform on a regular basis. I find that going through the process of establishing what needs to be done, organizing your steps within the task for optimal efficiency, and being able to follow a set list of items that you check off as you go allows you to be more consistent and productive in your editing tasks. So as an editor especially, this ability to be consistent in formatting and style and terminology has been invaluable, but I think it's helpful for many other types of tasks as well. But the checklist keeps me on task. It allows me to stop and start back up with less loss of focus and certainly less worry. It allows me to track metrics and accurately estimate future projects, at least the way I do a checklist. And we'll talk a little more about that. A checklist is a nice motivational tool, too. You get to see your progress as you go through a document. And if you do have good metrics, you'll be able to better estimate how much longer the task will take by where you are on the checklist. And while I do really think that it's the best use of a checklist is for common editing tasks you do regularly, I've also found it helpful for tasks that I don't do that regularly, like I don't do enough to remember what I'm supposed to do. If you do it once a year or once a quarter on a not regular basis, sometimes it's really helpful to write that down the first time so you don't forget. But let's go through the steps. And in the resources list of the editing checklist are an invaluable addition to your toolbox. But not just any checklist. I don't want you to throw something together or find one on the internet or find one in an editing textbook. No offense, Angela, if that's the kind of textbook you're writing. But there are a couple of big editing books that have terrible checklists from my perspective. So let's go into a little more detail on how to put together what I consider a good editing checklist. So, number one is to start with a document you edit often. Because you want to be very specific to the needs of that type of document. You want to not have to think about things because it's on the checklist for you. Two, you want to document everything, write it down, and actually write too much down. Just get it all down on a piece of paper, every step that you take. And then I want you to add specifics and do kind of a show and tell. So I hate when it says something like check headings. That is so not helpful when you have 5 different clients and they all have different kinds of headings and you're trying to check one of them. To me, I like to have it say, heading level should follow this format. And I wouldn't even probably have all those words. I would just show, show level 1 should look like this. And then tell yourself, oh, bold and underlined. Level 2 is just bold. Level 3 is underlined. So show yourself, tell yourself. This way you don't have to consult a style sheet or a style guide on minor items. This is one of the places where I feel like, especially if you're in a rush or you have a lot of interruptions, life is hard, this is very helpful to not have to second guess yourself or think about it too hard. It's all there for you. So fourth, and this is a big one, put it in order. So imagine the optimal performance of the steps and put it in that order. A lot of times we'll get into a document and we'll just, we kind of jump around, we do this and that, but what's the best way to do this? This is one of the places where you're going to get the efficiency. Step 5, start big. So what I like to do, because in our fast-paced world, we don't often get multiple passes as editors. I like to look at big picture items first. So I like the title. How many times have we missed the typo in the title? The headers, the footers, make sure they're there. I had one document come to me, and there were no page numbers in the footer. But there was a table of contents with page numbers on it. So tell me how you're supposed to work that. Silly things like that, tables and figure numbering. The layout as a whole, just if there's particular things that your company requires, just things that you need to make sure work in the layout. And then go smaller. Are there find and replace things that you can do for terminology or jargon, abbreviations? Are there formatting items or punctuation, symbols, capitalization? Get smaller and try to find ways to optimize it. So if you have perfected it, that's great. You can set it up to do a lot of stuff for you. And if you can't, you just find a replace or other little tricks. This is a way to do that. Some things to remember: provide a place for check marks. This is kind of where the motivation comes in, where it's a motivational item and it keeps you moving. And if you have teams, you can do these with teams. I have done it in the past with teams, and it does make you consistent throughout. Be sure to add instructions for them as well. So moving on to step 7, you can add mechanics. Just depends on, what kind of work you're doing. For instance, I had a job that I was there for 8 years. We had 5 different systems we had to get in to edit. So the first time you get into those new systems, you need a lot more instruction for yourself than you do later on. If there's any process-related instructions, like we had some things where the writers were making a lot of errors in certain places, and we had to check those over. And they wouldn't be a normal thing that you would check, but we would do it as a service to them. Spell check. I know it sounds silly, but definitely you don't want to get to the end of the document and get distracted by something else and come back and think that you did the spell check and you didn't. So I would put it on there. Updating the table of contents, putting it into the system that it needs to go to. This is really helpful, obviously, if you have different systems, but it's, if you've ever seen a document that obviously nobody spell checked, that's an important step as well. So 8, the tracking items, to me, are important if you want to try to keep any kind of metrics. I put in start and stop times, the length of the document, the level of edit, the level of difficulty of the author or team, the product or topic. A lot of these things are helpful for knowing how hard was it. Yeah, it takes a lot longer to edit a 100-page document than a 5-page document. Is there a particular author who's not that great? It takes you more time, Maybe you need to track that kind of thing for your manager. There's certain products that are harder than others, different topics. I know in pharma, oncology is a lot harder to read than, say, respiratory. That helps you know why it takes you longer to do things. It makes the metrics more robust. It also helps you, and I like to do them on paper. I know it's not very green. I'm green in many aspects of my life, but I like them on paper, not just for the satisfaction of the check marks, but also sometimes you don't get to do everything on your checklist. And you can go back to the checklist later, and when somebody says, oh, why wasn't this done? Well, you gave me a 100-page document and a day to do it, and I didn't get to everything. It helps you remember the document better. So I find that helpful. And then 9 to me is like one of the most important steps in this whole thing is test. Once you have a draft, make notes of what didn't work, make those changes to the next version, revise it, test it again. If you're doing a document a lot, you're just going to do it while you're working anyway, so it's not a big deal. But I think that's where you get the most productivity, efficiency kind of things. So how do you know when your checklist works? When you find an error because the checklist told you to look for it. I've done that so many times. So when you start a new document and you feel lost, and when you know that your edits are consistently more thorough and faster and you're confident, you've done all the time. You've done all that you can in the time that you have allotted, which isn't always as much as you want it to be. So here is a link to the handout that I just went through. And here's a video of a talk that's just about checklists, and as well as some slides for the talk about checklists. And then here are all the references. And like I said, I can send this out. I'm not sure if there's somewhere in the Hangouts that I can put this, but we can try to do that, or you can email me and I'll send it. So in case you thought all this was in my head, I did do quite a bit of research on some of it. Sometimes it was just to figure out how to talk about something, you know, what were where do I go in Word to do this, or how do I say, you know, what's a menu versus a tab, which is, you know, that kind of thing. But I also learned a lot, so I have a folder with more stuff, bookmarks. And then, you know, you can only have so many programs that run macros for you. So I'm just talked about my favorite. So what do you think? Does anybody want to talk about